The topic this morning, trusted leadership. A lot of people have this idea that you're either trusted or you're not. Like trust is some sort of a soft skill, and it just isn't true. Trust can be and should be intentionally developed, and it's extremely significant. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the research and all the data, but here's kind of the bottom line of my doctoral dissertation, all right? So 4 years into one quick statement, the number one indicator of successful schools is trusted leadership. But take a look at this. Low trust levels, and this comes from a variety of sources of research, but when schools experience low trust levels in their leadership, they have poor retention rates. In other words, they're not able to keep quality people on staff. In fact, you may be aware right now the United States is having a crisis. It's less than half of our teachers are staying more than 5 years in the school. And I'm talking about staying in the profession. Yeah. Throw onto that another piece of research that shows that it takes 5 to 7 years to develop a quality teacher. That means our quality teachers are leaving just at, you're right, exactly, right? Diminished achievement levels. There is a direct correlation between school leadership and how students perform. Waning support from the community. Stakeholders do not get excited about their school if they don't trust the leadership. Now it seems obvious, doesn't it? It's like, oh, right, duh. And there's even adversarial attitudes and behavior, especially in the world of social media. Now we see that, boy, if someone doesn't trust the school, they're not only waning in their support, they're actively being negative PR for the school on social media. They're complaining about it to their friends. And it costs more to run a school when you can't trust the leadership or you can't trust your staff. It costs more. Now, we all can think of how this applies to life. We see it constantly in the news and in the corporate world. I mean, think of what a lack of trust has cost Volkswagen so far. Something to the tune of $24 billion. And this story is all too common, isn't it? We're hearing it in the news every day now. Lack of trust. But look at the positive. Swing that around, and when school administrators are intentional in developing their level of trust, take a look at what happens. It's the exact opposite. You have increased retention. Those are the schools where you see teachers and quality teachers staying and growing and fostering more quality teachers. Greater student achievement levels are seen. You see stronger community relations. People love their school. You actually have fewer behavior management issues as well. This is interesting. When the school leadership is trusted, kids behave. Yeah, and I can show you the research. And it costs less to run the school. It's actually cheaper. And for private schools world, we actually make more money when the leadership is trusted. It's because it's cheaper to run the school. The leader doesn't need to have so many things in place to ensure that people behave, but rather he's got a trusted team who he empowers, they trust him or her in return, and it actually costs less to run the school. What does it look like from the research? What are the behaviors of these trusted school leaders? What does that look like? Well, if I ask you, what would be a behavior you expect out of someone that you trust? I know that almost the number one thing you're going to say. You're going to say, well, it's somebody who listens to me. And they know how to listen. They've got that skill of actually, staying focused and listening. In fact, when I do leadership trainings now, I've created a little acrostic, and we'll actually take time and role play this out in different situations and practice listening. And again, developing trust is just that. It's developed. It's intentional living. Well, how do we do it intentionally? Take a look at this. Here's a quick way to up your game when it comes to listening, and then if you do so, in return, you discover that you're more trusted. So it begins with looking. I had a show business friend of mine who once told me, you know what your most powerful weapon is as an entertainer? And I'm like, no, what? He goes, eye contact. It is your most powerful weapon as an entertainer. And I would watch him work a crowd, and he literally would eyeball nearly everybody, depending on how big the crowd was, or at least make sections, but he would always make direct eye contact. And I learned even in my professional life as an educator and as a school administrator, same thing's true. If I'm in conversation with a distraught parent or a distraught kid, or someone's upset about this, or I've got a faculty member that's, just really boiled up, if I will give them this, they open up. Often, someone come into my office. School administrators, what we do is we're problem solvers. We sit in the complaint room all day long. I mean, that's what we do, right? And by the time it comes to my office, it's a problem. And what I've learned is the distraught parent, student, teacher comes into my office, and I'll open up by saying something like, "So how can I help you today?" And then I shut my mouth, and I look them in the eye. And I wait. And then they open up and they begin talking. I'm also initiating some qualifying questions. I'm not setting an agenda. I'm just digging out more information. So if I wasn't clear on something, and I'm asking questions about what they're concerned about, and I'm initiating that. I'm not trying to solve their problem yet. I'm just listening, and I'm making sure that I'm understanding. When the trusted leader stays focused, you don't rabbit trail off. It's okay, but we're here to talk about this today, right? Help me understand what your concern is. And take time. One way to demonstrate that you care is not to be constantly pushed into an agenda of something else, but let people know that you're my priority right now, and you take the time. Turn off the phone, or at least turn off those, all those notices, and give them the time. Empathize. Now, this doesn't mean that you're necessarily agreeing with whatever the situation's going on. A principal of mine, when I was a vice principal years ago, I learned this from him. He was great. I would sit in difficult meetings with him, and he would be with a difficult parent, rather, and he would say to the parent things like, "That must be really hard what you're going through. I'm sorry you're feeling this way." He's not condoning what they're saying, but he is doing what? He's demonstrating empathy, and they trust him. And then always be mindful of the nonverbal. One study shows that 90% of meaning is derived from the nonverbal. Classic example. Think of your favorite teacher from school. Okay, whether it was college or high school or elementary school, think of your favorite teacher. What do you remember? A class that they taught? No. What do you remember? You remember how they were as a person, right? How they made you feel. Interesting, you've probably seen this survey, came out of the Gallup Group back in 2009. Employees don't leave companies, they leave managers and supervisors. Similar studies have been done by a variety of educational leadership organizations, and very, very similar statistics, where for teachers, the number one reason for leaving is lack of a professional environment, and number two, lack of support. And I would say both of those are kind of a redefining of the same thing. Well, what does this tell us? It tells us that people want to know that you care as a leader. And if they know that you care, they're going to stick around, they're going to stay. So they listen, they empathize, they avoid manipulation. And the fourth one, they speak honestly. And those two, I think, really are well connected. Trusted leaders don't add fluff. They don't have a hidden agenda. They're transparent. You know what they're about. You know what's going on. You know they're going to tell you the truth, even sometimes when it may hurt. I can't help but think about Abraham Lincoln when I think about, Honest Abe. But look at what he said about character. He said, "Character's like a tree, and reputation like its shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing." I've been amazed. I don't know if you've seen this in the leadership literature the last few years. There's a whole new area now called reputation management. There are a number of books out about this. Actually, you can study this now as a discipline in university, that you can focus on, you can be a reputation manager. Yeah, there's a part of that it's like, that's not quite right, is it? I mean, why do we need this? Lincoln would say, focus on your character development, and you don't need anybody to manage your reputation. Speak honestly. How many have read Good to Great by Jim Collins? Oh, you got to get that on your book. And again, it has so many life lessons. It's not just about leadership, although it is about leadership. Collins identifies what he calls the level 5 leader. This is the best kind of leader, and they are the leaders that take organizations from being good organizations to great organizations. And he describes that level 5 leader as having 2 key characteristics. One is that they're humble. They're humble people. And number 2, that they're passionate about the vision. They're passionate about their direction. Well, trusted leaders know where the focus needs to be, and they stay on that focus. One of the things that I see in visiting schools, and I've had the opportunity to be now on hundreds of campuses in many, many different places, and it's classic. I see it over and over again. Schools that could be great, but they're not. They're just good schools, are there because they're doing a whole bunch of good things. You follow me? They're so busy doing all these good things, they're not focused on being a great school. Trusted leaders know how to stay focused and not be distracted. 95% of workers are unaware of their company's top objectives. Do you know what your top objectives are here? Good. That's good to know. Because when I ask that question on a school campus, I get glazed eyes. Oh, I don't know. Jim Collins, again, author of Good to Great, he said if you have more than 2 or 3 priorities, you have none. And trusted leaders are able to identify whatever those 2, 3 top priorities are of your organization, and they stay focused there. They ask questions. Now, this is related to what we saw earlier, but this goes further. You know, in the listening, there is an initiating, qualifying questions for understanding, but good, trusted leaders, they ask lots of questions, almost ad nauseum. Because what are they doing? They're discovering, they're gathering data, and these typically are slow movers. Trusted leaders are not the quick guys. Trusted leaders they're slow movers, and they're going to ask lots of questions. Actually, it's related to this next one. They tend to be individuals who keep an open mind. They very rarely are dogmatic, and they wait to make conclusions because they're so busy asking questions. Warren Buffett has said it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. Leaders ruin their reputations when they make decisions too quickly. So I know we live in a world where you want things to go, go, go. Trusted leaders will get it done. They are focused and they will make progress, but they're going to take their time in making conclusions. They're going to ask a lot of questions. I want to see all the data before I move ahead. And they don't criticize. Now, this is hard, especially in our culture. We live in a critical culture. We feed on criticism, which is almost equated to cynicism in much of our culture. You know, we're a whole bunch of cynics. Good leaders don't criticize, though. We know through the research that students learn most through self-discovery. In fact, the poorest form of education is what we're doing right now. You sitting passively listening to a speaker. It's the worst type of education. I want the learning to go deep. I may talk for a couple of minutes, but then you're talking to each other, you're doing the application to your life, you're investigating more of what it means. That type of learning goes really, really deep. And they simplify the complicated. This one is painful because it's true. John Maxwell made this observation. Educators, he's talking about guys like me, take something simple and make it complicated. Communicators take something complicated and make it simple. Now, why do academics do this? Well, it's because educators know there's always more than 2 sides to a story. There's always 3 or 4 or 5 sides, and before I'm going to make a decision or make an opinion, I want to hear all perspectives, and it takes time. But trusted leaders are able to do that academic piece, if you will, and then bring it into a focused direction. They're able to make it simple. So here you go, 9 behaviors of trusted school leaders. We could call this article 9 behaviors of a trusted spouse, 9 behaviors of a trusted parent, 9 behaviors of a trusted ministry worker. They listen, they empathize, they avoid manipulation and speak honestly. They stay focused and avoid distractions. They ask questions. They keep an open mind and wait to make conclusions. They don't criticize, and they simplify the complicated. But the only thing priceless is trust. And shouldn't it be our greatest investment? That has become my conviction as a school leader and as a ministry leader, and as I have the opportunity to speak in the lives of others, is if we'll focus intentionally on developing our level of trust, you're going to see all kinds of benefits to your school, to your ministry, to your love life, if that trust bucket is full. So there you go, 9 behaviors of trusted school leaders.